If you want to dominate exams with grades like these to get rewards like this, then stick around. I've got tips, tricks, and strategies that you don't have to sell your soul for. Aren't I so generous? Now, I imagine you clicked on this video because you're familiar with Twisted Wonderland's exams being a battle simulation minigame that tests different team comps made from cards you've collected against various challenges to see just how strong they are, which then gives out rewards based on your team's performance. And if you weren't, well, now you are. The main driver for tackling these challenges is the rewards you obtain, and these fancy purple stamps give you the most. So how do we get these grades? The answer is surprisingly simple, but it does require knowledge of the minigame's mechanics. So let's start with what exactly makes up an exam. When you head to the exam page, you'll be met by one of the professors who's standing alongside two very fancy banners. These banners will give you all of the information you need to prep for battle. If we take one of these aside to consider, we can see the elemental affinity of our enemies clearly displayed in both icon and text form at the top. In a fire exam like this one, the enemy team will use only fire spells, so having our team consist of water users will help us score more points and therefore a higher grade. The next and probably most important yet least obvious piece of information is the scoring criteria, which is tucked away in this little subtitle. There are two different types of criteria and they test two very different things. So it's important to understand which one you're going into before you begin the exam. Defense exams, like the one shown here, score you based on how much HP you have left after the battle. Basic exams, on the other hand, score you based on how much damage you do to the enemy team, including any overkill. With a bit of mystical math, these criteria create a number, which then becomes our score, our highest of which we can see in the last bit here. This is the highest score we've managed to get during the exam period, and what overall rank or grade that score translates to. It's important to note that this is just for the current exam period and is not your high score overall across all exams of this type. If you want to look back and see how you've done in the past, you can tap the exam records button to bring up your last 5 scores. You'll also be able to see your last 5 joint exam scores from this page as well if that interests you. You also might have noticed that the records page does not display the scoring criteria, just the elemental affinities. And why is that important info missing? Well, the explanation as far as I can tell is that basic exams are always in the left banner and defense in the right. So, looking at this list, the scoring criteria can be inferred from the position of each record. With this little fun fact, you also won't ever have to read the subtitle text again, since the scoring criteria is linked to these positions, which makes them easier to remember, so that way when you're building out your teams, you'll know exactly which cards to put in which team for what exam. So let's take a look at team composition. This page is where we'll prep for battle by selecting cards that we feel are best suited for the challenge based on its criteria, which is also shown up here if you happen to forget at this stage. Team composition is nebulous by design, as there are tons of different cards and card combinations, so as long as you understand what's in your collection and how those cards work together, you'll do just fine. Since the point of exams is to test these team comps, any card can be viable under the right circumstances. In general, though, you'll want your team to include cards that are geared towards the exam scoring criteria. For example, in basic exams, it's generally good to use attack-type cards with a high power stat that, preferably, work together with a couple duo spells. In defense exams, though, it's better to have defense-type cards or those with high HP, preferably ones with healing abilities, buffs, or debuffs. These qualities are somewhat straightforward, and you can of course experiment around, but to get those high S ranks, you're gonna want to play to these strengths. Now, once your team is ready, there is one last hurdle to clear before the challenge really begins, and that's selecting a difficulty. Each of these has a set multiplier that will be applied to your score, pass or fail, after the battle, which is then what determines your final grade. These difficulties also affect things in battle like your enemy's HP pool and the abilities at their disposal. On hard difficulty, you're more likely to run into your enemy buffing themselves or debuffing you, including curses, which can be very annoying in defense exams. So, knowing about these in advance can help you plan out your actions like healing. And if we're targeting those high S ranks, we need to do so on hard difficulty. Why? The multiplier. If we harken back to our fire example, we can reverse engineer this high score to get our base score. And from there, we can figure out what grades we would have gotten with the same score in the two other tiers. As we can see, it's not very impressive. We'd have to work twice as hard in a normal exam to get a similar rank, and it's just not economical. Now, if you're having a lot of trouble clearing hard exams or can't clear them at all with your current card library, that's okay. You can get A ranks on normal difficulty pretty consistently, which will still net you decent rewards, especially if you're just beginning. Once you've gotten some beefier cards in your library, taking on the hard challenges will be much easier. But regardless of where your cards are at, there are ways to make sure you're scoring high consistently, even if the badges you get aren't purple. We now know which stats matter for each exam's scoring criteria, what difficulties we should be attempting, and general guidelines for setting up our team, so what else is there to know? Well, let's look at our goal ranks and find out. There are certain targets that you'll want to hit for each rank that work for both scoring criteria. On hard difficulty in a basic exam, you'll want to deal your target percentage or more damage compared to your enemy, and you'll want to do it ideally by round 3 or 4, where you can end the battle with some overkill damage. In a defense exam, you'll want to retain your target percentage of HP while surviving for as long as possible, hopefully making it to the end of round 5 with that percentage still intact. These target percentages are as follows. For a triple S, you're going to want 80-ish or more percent. For a double, you're going to want 60-ish plus. And for a single, you're going to want 40-ish plus. Now, these percentages are an approximation and are not hard and fast rule. So sometimes you'll end up at 80% and not get a triple S, or sometimes you'll do 70% and get an S. It's a little wacky, but as long as you keep these ranges in mind, you'll be scoring high more often than not. And since these percentages are shared between the two scoring criteria, it'll be easy to remember them since there's only one of them. So now that we have this final piece of the puzzle, we can see what all of the things we've learned look like in practice. So let's head into a basic exam and see if we can get at least a double S. So here we have our lovely team for our fire basic exam. We have a lot of spells in the dominant element, and some of those spells are also duo spells. So if we can use those last to end off the battle, we'll gain even more overkill damage. However, if we can't, using Jade's duo with Lloyd or Vill's duo with Azul will still work just as well. We won't get quite as much overkill damage, but we'll still be doing more than we would have if we were not using a duo spell. Along these lines, we also have buddy bonuses. Unfortunately, with this lineup, we do not have very many power bonuses. We only, I believe, have one, so not ideal, but also not the end of the world. Once we're in battle, before we even do anything else, we can see already the percentage bar at the top. You start at 50-50, and then once you start to do damage, you'll see the bar fluctuate in different directions depending on who's getting hit. Now, this bar in a basic exam will show you the target percentages that we were talking about. So if this bar says 75, you're in the double S section. If this bar says 82, then you're in the triple S section, roughly. Now, this isn't exact, and things can happen, like I mentioned before, but this is a pretty good indicator, so if you keep your eye on this as well, you will basically have a good idea of where you're going to stand once the battle finishes. We're going to prioritize our duo spells if we can and try to get those out to just chip away at damage and try to end this battle earlier rather than later. Unfortunately, we have Azul's duo right at the start, so we're going to have to hold on to that, but we can start out by using Vill's duo here. no problems using Azul's other spell. It will burn the healing, but that doesn't matter. Given that this is a basic exam, we don't really need that. For our second round here, we have now Riddle's duo out, so we're going to use that with Azul's to just capitalize on their damage and try to get this HP down as much as possible for round 3. Which we do get it pretty decently down. So now we have some options. We could either do Jade's duo or Floyd's duo. Now we could save Floyd's duo for round 4, which would make sense given it's in the dominant element, but Floyd's spell is not level 10, and he's also not fully leveled in other ways. So I'm going to use that here first to get the HP down as much as possible, and then we can use Floyd and Jade next turn to end the battle. And we have the perfect amount of HP left to end on round 2, which is not ideal, but, you know, is what it is. So we're going to send Floyd out first, Jade out second, and we're going to end with, I want to say like around 6 or more K overkill damage, so that'll be good. And now that the battle's done, we can see that we got a double S, just as predicted. So we stacked our team with cards that were predominantly in the dominant element. We had a lot of duos. We kept our percentage above 60%. In fact, I think we ended with 74, so we were sitting pretty good. And now we get to reap the rewards. Pretty simple overall, not too bad. Now, let us go over to our Omni Defense exam. Here we have a team that is full of all of the elements under the rainbow. It looks very pretty, but it's also very practical. Omni exams are probably, in my opinion, one of the easiest to tackle because you can just put whatever cards you have in there and chances are they'll probably work fine given that the elements are what they are. They can be anything. So on this team we have 4 Flora, 3 Water, and 3 Fire spells, which is a pretty balanced grouping. This distribution is also helpful given the different attributes of some of the cards. So like in Malleus's case, his Flora spell will heal us, but his Water spell will also nullify curses for his allies, which can be very useful in a defense exam. So if you have cards that have abilities like this, they can be very beneficial in this battle. I would say that cards that have healing abilities are probably a higher priority though, so if you have those, incorporate them first and then work on your buffs and debuffs. We don't have a lot of buddy bonuses, but they are a majority HP buddy bonuses, which are what we really need for this kind of exam. So let's get into it and see how well we can do. Now on turn 1, we have a very interesting spread here. We have guaranteed going to do Water, so we're absolutely going to use Floyd or Mal. Floyd being the better choice because if we don't get cursed, then Floyd will continuously give us HP at the end of the next 3 rounds, including this one. After that, it's kind of just a guessing game, and so I think we'll go with Jade. And as you can see, Floyd healed us. Very nice, very snazzy. And now we have even more choices. So we want to do Fire second. So let's do Mal and Floyd. Perfect. Didn't get cursed, which is amazing. And now we're going to absolutely use Lilia first. So with the only other spell in their arsenal being a fire, we might as well send Lilia out by himself and get that heal off, plus, you know, do a little bit of damage and take a little bit less damage. So given that the second spell is Flora, but there's still fire on the table, we don't want to send Jade out first, but it would be good to send him out just in case fire is retained next turn. And that way we can ensure that Azul's healing will pop off because Malleus can avoid the curses. So we'll send Azul and Jade out here. And now we'll send off Malleus and Azul. We'll send Malleus first so that way he can nullify the curse and then Azul will just heal regardless. So So with that, we're still sitting at a very healthy chunk of HP. We're only about 20-ish K down if you're just looking at the whole numbers. And that will get us a triple S. Look at that, how fancy. And now it is on the low side, but it doesn't matter because if you get to 20,001, you still get a triple S. And that's all you need for the rewards. We had some HP buddy bonuses, but more importantly, we had a lot of healing spells and we had a lot of buffing and debuffing spells. And those really help in these types of exams. For some reason, there was not a curse that popped off here. Generally, there is, and all of the times that I tried before this take, I ran into curses almost every turn. So it really is a little bit of luck as well to try to get these ranks, because not every battle is going to be exactly the same, but it is attainable and you can do it. So what are you waiting for? Go on out there and apply all that you've learned to your exams and see just how far you can get. But before that, if you liked this video, please let me know with a like or a comment or maybe even a subscribe. And if you'd be interested in guides like this in the future, please let me know below. And I would like to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.